The boardroom on the 42nd floor had never felt this tense. Outside the glass walls, the city moved like nothing was wrong. Traffic crawling, phones ringing, sunlight bouncing off towers. But inside that room, a multi-million-dollar international deal was dying in real time. 12 professional interpreters had been brought in for the negotiation. 12, each highly certified, each recommended, each confident. And yet, one by one, they had failed. The visiting delegation spoke in layered dialects. Subtle regional variations blended into formal speech, and every attempt at translation created more confusion instead of clarity. What was meant to be a signing ceremony had turned into a slow-motion collapse. Voices grew sharper. Brows tightened. The CEO sat at the head of the table, staring at the documents that represented 18 months of travel, planning, and negotiation. If this deal fell apart, the company would lose more than money. It would lose credibility. Outside the room, unnoticed, a man in a gray cleaning uniform pushed his cart quietly down the hallway. His name was Daniel. Most employees barely registered his presence. He emptied bins, wiped glass, vacuumed carpets long after executives had gone home. He worked early mornings and late nights because that was when cleaning staff were least in the way. He preferred it that way. Fewer stairs, fewer reminders of where he stood in the company hierarchy. Daniel was a single father of 2 young children. 3 years earlier, he had lost his wife after a sudden illness. She had been the adventurous one, an international aid worker who moved wherever she was needed. During their marriage, they had lived in multiple countries across Asia, Europe, and South America. Daniel had followed her, picking up work where he could, learning languages not out of ambition but out of necessity. Markets, hospitals, schools, survival demanded fluency. Over time, survival became skill. Skill became mastery. By the time they finally returned home to build a more stable life, Daniel spoke 8 languages with ease. But stability did not last. After his wife passed, grief came first. Then responsibility. Bills did not pause for mourning. He took the first steady job he could find. Cleaning. It paid regularly. It offered health insurance. It kept food on the table. As Daniel wiped down the corridor windows near the boardroom, he heard raised voices inside. At first he ignored it. Corporate disagreements were none of his concern. But then he heard a phrase, a very specific idiom spoken in a rare regional dialect of Mandarin. It was subtle, almost poetic, and completely mistranslated by one of the interpreters. Daniel paused. He listened closer. Another sentence followed, this time in French, but with West African inflections. Again, the translation was slightly off. Not catastrophically wrong, but wrong enough to change tone. In high-stakes negotiations, tone is everything. He stood there longer than he should have. His cart sat still. His heart began to pound. It was not his place to intervene. He was the cleaner. Walking into that room would draw looks. The kind of looks that reminded him he wore a uniform that made people underestimate him. He had experienced it before. Polite smiles that did not reach the eyes, conversations that stopped when he entered, people assuming he did not understand when they spoke foreign languages around him. He had swallowed those moments quietly because pride did not pay school fees. Inside the boardroom, frustration peaked. One of the visiting delegates leaned back, clearly irritated. Another checked his watch. The CEO whispered urgently to his assistant. A senior interpreter removed her glasses and sighed. The dialect shifts are too inconsistent, she admitted. We may need to reschedule. Reschedule. Everyone in the room knew that was corporate language for failure. Daniel took a breath. He thought of his children, of the example he wanted to set for them, not about job titles, but about courage. He knocked. The sound was soft, but in a room that tense, it might as well have been thunder. Heads turned toward the glass door. The CEO looked irritated at first, expecting a routine interruption. When he saw it was the cleaner, confusion replaced annoyance. Daniel opened the door slightly and spoke calmly. I'm sorry to interrupt. I believe I can help. There was a brief silence, followed by disbelief. One of the interpreters actually laughed under her breath. A senior executive frowned. This is a high-level negotiation, someone muttered. Daniel felt the weight of their doubt, but he did not step back. I understand, he replied evenly. But I speak the dialect they're using, and the others as well. The CEO hesitated. Desperation has a way of overriding pride. You speak it fluently, he asked. Daniel nodded. Yes, sir. All right, the CEO said finally. We have nothing to lose. Daniel stepped fully into the room, leaving his card in the hallway. He stood near the table, posture straight but humble. He addressed the delegation in Mandarin first, not generic textbook Mandarin, but the precise regional dialect that had caused confusion moments earlier. The change in the visitors' expressions was immediate. Surprise flickered across their faces. Daniel continued, clarifying the earlier mistranslation, smoothing over the unintended offense caused by tone. Then he transitioned seamlessly into French, adjusting to match the delegate's accent. Then Spanish. Then Arabic. German followed. Portuguese. Russian. Japanese. 8 languages flowed from him without notes, without hesitation, without ego. The atmosphere shifted. Tension dissolved into engagement. Questions that had felt confrontational moments before now sounded collaborative. Jokes were shared. Clarifications were made. Cultural nuances were explained correctly. Within 30 minutes, the deal that had been collapsing was back on track. Pens hovered over contracts again. A final exchange of words, accurately translated, sealed the agreement. And here, right at that moment, a thought crossed Daniel's mind. A thought that everyone watching could take away. If you've ever felt underestimated, ignored, or overlooked, know this. Your time to shine will come. Don't wait for permission. Step forward when it matters most. If this story inspired you, share it now with someone who needs to hear it, and comment below. What hidden talent do you have that the world hasn't seen yet? When the last signature dried, the room remained quiet for a different reason. The CEO looked at Daniel with a mixture of astonishment and embarrassment. The interpreters avoided eye contact. The delegation's lead representative smiled and said, in clear English, "You have a remarkable employee." After the visitors left, the CEO asked the question everyone was thinking. Why are you working as a cleaner? Daniel did not answer immediately. He chose his words carefully. Because it was honest work. And my children needed stability. He briefly explained his past, the countries he had lived in, the languages he had learned alongside his wife, how life had changed after her death. There was no self-pity in his voice. Just fact. He had never included those skills on a resume because he had never been asked. And because sometimes, when survival becomes the priority, ambition takes a back seat. The realization settled heavily over the executives. For months, years, even, they had walked past extraordinary talent without noticing. Not because it was hidden, but because they never thought to look. That afternoon, Daniel was asked to return, not with a mop, but with a meeting invitation. The company created a role in international communications and cross-cultural strategy specifically for him. His salary increased significantly. His working hours stabilized. For the first time in years, he picked his children up from school before sunset. But the true transformation was not financial. It was cultural. Word spread quickly through the company. Employees began looking at one another differently. The cleaning staff were greeted by name. Security guards were included in conversations. Assumptions were questioned. The CEO later admitted in a company-wide address, "We almost lost our biggest opportunity because we only valued titles. We forgot to value people." Daniel never boasted about what he had done. The next morning, he still arrived early. Old habits do not disappear overnight. But he no longer walked invisibly. People nodded with respect. Some even asked him about language learning, about travel, about resilience. He answered kindly, always redirecting praise toward the importance of opportunity. At home, his children noticed the change not in wealth, but in lightness. Their father smiled more. Stress no longer followed him through the door. One evening, his daughter asked why everyone at his office suddenly seemed to know his name. Daniel thought for a moment and said, "Because sometimes people don't see what's in front of them until they truly need it." The story spread beyond the company walls, not because of corporate press releases, but because those who witnessed it told others. It became a reminder, shared in conversations, classrooms, and leadership seminars, that talent does not always arrive in tailored suits. Intelligence does not always introduce itself loudly, and the quietest person in the hallway may carry the solution everyone else overlooked. In the end, the most powerful lesson was simple: never measure someone's worth by the uniform they wear. Titles can mislead. Appearances can deceive. But ability, character, and courage reveal themselves when it matters most. And on a day when 12 experts could not bridge a divide, a widowed single father with a cleaning cart did. Not because he sought recognition, but because he chose to step forward when stepping forward was uncomfortable. Sometimes, that is all greatness is.